Okay, here's a thought experiment for you. What if the police force in your city was still running on a law written way back in 1861? And what if that law wasn't written to protect you, but to control a population for a foreign empire? Well, that's not a hypothetical. For huge parts of India, it's a reality. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. How the ghosts of the British Raj are still haunting modern India.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll get a handle on what this colonial mindset thing really is. Then we're going to see how it shows up in India's legal system, its huge debates over language, and even in the classroom. And finally, we'll get to the heart of it all, the big, messy, and super important question of what it actually means to decolonize.
Okay, let's kick things off with the big idea that really ties this whole story together. This idea of a colonial framework that just stuck around. You know, here's a fact that sounds like it's straight out of a history book, but it's affecting millions of people right now. In many parts of India, the police are still governed by a law from 1861. And this isn't just some dusty old piece of trivia. No, this one law is a massive symbol of a much, much deeper issue that's shaping the country today. So here's the crucial thing to get. Colonialism wasn't just a political thing that wrapped up in 1947. It left behind an entire operating system, a mindset. And this system is still running, kind of like ghost code in the background of modern India, influencing everything from the police to the way kids are taught in school. So let's see how this ghost in the system actually works in real life. And our first stop is that 1861 Police Act we were just talking about.
The Police Act of 1861 wasn't created to protect everyday Indian citizens, not at all. It was a direct reaction to the huge Indian revolts of 1857. Its one and only purpose was to build a police force that was loyal to the British, designed to crush any dissent and keep control. And the really wild part, that very same law is still the foundation for policing in so many Indian states.
And this slide just lays it all out, right? You see the fundamental clash. The very DNA of this law is about control, not community. It was designed for ruling over subjects, which is the exact opposite of what a modern democracy is supposed to be about, which is having a police force that serves and is accountable to its citizens.
So because this old, rusty framework is still bolted in place, the system is just riddled with problems. It leaves the door wide open for politicians to interfere, it doesn't have strong systems for holding police accountable, and it's seriously held back any real modernization, from investigation methods to just basic equipment. All right, let's switch gears and talk about language. This is another area where that colonial legacy is a really big and often really sensitive deal. Honestly, the story of English in India is the perfect example of this complicated inheritance. Okay, you have to read this quote. Wow, it's so blunt. Back in 1835, this British official, Thomas Macaulay, wasn't trying to hide anything. The whole point of teaching English was to create a very specific type of person, an elite class that would basically act as a go-between to help run the empire. So after independence, you get this huge clash, right? On one side, there's a big push for Hindi as the national language, as a way to build a new, unified Indian identity. But on the other side, English was already the language of the government, of the best universities, and of international business. It gave a massive advantage to an English-speaking elite. And yeah, this was not just some polite academic argument. The push for Hindi led to widespread and sometimes violent protests, especially in South India, where a lot of people felt it was just another form of northern dominance. So in the end, the government had to guarantee that English would stick around, which cemented its role as a compromise that was politically necessary, but still created a lot of social division.
And all of this, of course, leads us straight to education, which is where the colonial model has left some of its deepest and, as many argue, most damaging scars.
And this isn't a new criticism, not by a long shot. I mean, think about this. Way back in 1892, the Nobel Prize winner Rabindranath Tagore was already calling the system out. He said it was all about rote memorization in a foreign language and that it was completely disconnected from the actual lives and culture of Indian kids.
So when you boil it down, the goal wasn't really to create a generation of innovators or critical thinkers. It was more like an assembly line, designed to produce clerks and low-level administrators who could help run the colonial government. And the curriculum often put Western knowledge on a pedestal, ignoring local culture and realities.
And for someone like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the main architect of India's constitution, he saw this problem crystal clear. He basically said you can't just slap a democratic government on top of a society that hasn't been taught democratic values. He argued that democracy isn't something that just happens, It has to be actively taught and nurtured to ever really take hold.
Okay, so we've laid out the problems in law, in language, in the classroom. So what's the fix? Well, this is where things get really, really complicated and very political.
I mean, what does decolonize even mean in practice? Is it just about changing street names and pulling down statues? Or is there something way deeper and way harder going on?
And here we have the central dilemma. On the one hand, one path is to try and go back to some imagined, pure pre-colonial past. But the risk there, as critics point out, is that you end up creating a romanticized history that conveniently ignores India's own complex social problems. The other path is to focus on building a new future, one that's democratic and inclusive. And that means acknowledging all of its history, the good, the bad, and yes, the colonial.
And this brings up a really charged term you hear a lot, saffronization. Critics use this term to argue that some decolonization efforts, particularly in education, aren't about creating a more open society. Instead, they say, it's about replacing one dominant ideology with another, rather than building a truly pluralistic and democratic space for everyone.
And that really leaves us with the million-dollar question, doesn't it? I think the big takeaway here is that decolonization isn't like hitting a delete button. It's a messy, difficult, ongoing negotiation with history, identity, and power. It forces a country to constantly ask itself not just what it wants to get rid of, but more importantly, what it truly wants to become.